and welcome to this week's episode of Truffle Talks. I'm James Stephen, the editor of Truffle Report, and Truffle Talks is our new interview series where we sit down with the movers and shakers defining psychedelic business, policy reform, science, and culture. Joining us today is Raad Seraj. Raad is an artist, activist, tech entrepreneur, and perhaps most interesting to me, a venture partner at the Conscious Fund. Raad, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, James. Pleasure to be here.
All right. For those who don't know, the Conscious Fund is a venture capital fund investing in early stage psychedelic medicine. And we're certainly going to talk about CF a bit more, but that isn't really why we're here. Raad and I connected a while back at an event, actually a book launch for Professor Erica Dick, who is one of our previous speakers, and you can find on the Truffle Talks section of our website at episode 7. And we got to talking about, Raad and I got to talking about what ethical investment in psychedelics could actually look like. And Raad mentioned he'd been working on a project to guide newer, smaller investors into the space with just that in mind, specifically with an eye towards getting those investors access to securities and funding rounds at some of the same rates that larger players in the space have enjoyed. Raad, how's that going for you?
Great, thanks. That's a great summary of our first conversation, James. I appreciate that. Things are going great. I mean, it's just a pleasure to be immersed in this space and seeing how this space is rapidly evolving in all directions. And at least at this point in time, it's also amazing to see the diversity of conversations happening in this space. Whether you're on the not-for-profit side, whether you're an activist, whether you're a patient advocate, whether you're a startup developing psychedelic medicines or some other sort of value add in the sort of ecosystem. It's just been fantastic.
All right, thanks. So before we go any further, I'd just like a bit of background on yourself, how you got into this, how you came to be involved in psychedelics and the investment side.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess my journey into psychedelics is maybe unconventional, but also not unconventional, given that most people here at this time in the psychedelic ecosystem come from all over the place.
I don't know if there's such a thing as a conventional psychedelic journey. If there is, maybe we're doing it wrong, man.
That's exactly it, man. I feel like the medicine finds you no matter where you are in your journey in life. A little bit about me. I don't have a background in investing or psychedelics, or anything like that, or finance. I actually spent about 10 years in a range of impact technologies. So by that, I mean any technology that touches, society or the environment at large. So my background is actually in biotech and cancer research. I spent a few years researching. And then I sort of moved into advanced renewable energy. At that time, in 2011, I was working with sort of giant enterprises as part of my graduate thesis, looking at ways to turn essentially pond scum or algae into a climate neutral aviation fuel. And what would you need to do? What sort of corporate partners do you need? What sort of commercial activities do you need? What sort of policy support do you need? Things like that. Did that for a few years. And then in 2012, I was part of a founding team that started what was at that time one of the world's first innovation center based in Toronto that was solely dedicated to water. So our job was bringing together governments, regulators, venture capitalists, and startups to commercialize or bring to market new ways to address water needs, whether you're a giant corporation like IKEA or Toyota or a small village in Ghana. So, that ran that for about 6 years into a global reputed organization, burnt out from, the workload and just sort of the constant hustle. As a lot of
which is a story I hear a lot in this business.
Yep.
A lot of the people who find psychedelics as a medicine and as a line of work come from that background and have experienced that burnout. I would go so far as to say I'm one of them too.
I feel like we all are in this sort of age of the rat race, right? I think there was a time when I remember when being an entrepreneur was glamorized in the way that's build a company, blah blah blah, and then the hustle porn became such a thing, right? You glamorize work and not knowing how to rest, not how to rejuvenate and things like that. So happened to me, but that's an essential part of the journey, I think. And then sort of I found a company, a enterprise software company called Benevity, based out of Calgary, but there was an office in Toronto. And Benevity is the global leader in corporate social responsibility software. And part of what it touches is employees in giant enterprises, right? So, I got very lucky in the sense that, it was a company that I really cared about. It was at the intersection of technology, social impact, and community. And January 2020, the company was acquired by a private equity firm based out of the UK. Became Canada's newest unicorn, perhaps the world's only B Corp certified unicorn, which is incredible. Just very lucky. And even though I wasn't part of one of the early employees, the company had a policy so that every employee would basically participate in the company's success. So I got quite fortunate in the sense that I got an exit package, which is incredible. And that sort of set me up for the first time in my life to really think about, well, how else can I support the things that I love? And I think after 10 years in climate change and social impact, I think, although I think technology is a really essential part of, human culture and human progress, and you can put progress in quotes if you want. I think without a tangible shift in consciousness and culture, I don't think technology alone will do much, because without a tangible shift in consciousness and culture, we just end up building better bombs to kill each other, right? Technology is a mirror, not a magic ball. It cannot show you the future. It only shows you it only reflects human nature.
I would say
so
psychedelics are as well.
Absolutely. I was just gonna say, I think, there's no panacea anywhere, but I think psychedelics, and I've had my personal healing journey with psychedelics for a number of years, which it wasn't the only thing, but definitely it was had a profound impact on me and my relationships and how I looked at the world, and what drove me, helped me understand myself. And I think I did not participate in cannabis, because even though I consume cannabis, I have no interest in sort of like helping that ecosystem grow. I didn't like what I was seeing. I didn't like the kind of people that was participating, the way we were talking about it. But psychedelics was an entirely different thing. And I just happened to, in January last year, I was looking, okay, what can I do? And I happened to land in different conversations. I was already immersed in the underground. And so I was looking around, I found a conscious fund on LinkedIn. I reached out and I basically said, I learned a little bit about them. I looked at a couple of different funds at that time. There's more now, which are all the funds are doing incredible work, I think. And at that time, I thought Conscious Fund was doing great things. They had a great portfolio company already, so they were doing something right. There was a lot of talk about ethics, not prescriptive. It was more like, these are the questions we have, and that's sort of my approach. It's more, rather than saying we should do that thing, it's like, what is the right thing to do? Coming from that heuristic principle.
Yeah, they came in with a more open mind than you had seen.
It felt like at that time, yeah. I mean, with that said, for me, the thing was like, I know there was a lot that needs to be worked out. It's an early sector, and I think mistakes will be made and there will be success and things like that. So for me, it was okay, at this point in time of the funds, let me approach these guys. I'm not an accredited investor, neither do I care to be at this point of time. And so the thing was, okay, there's two places that I think that should be open to community. And by that, I mean regular people, climate change and psychedelics, because these two spaces are all about changing or upending the status quo, whether it's internally or externally, right? And so, my pitch to Conscious Fund was like, look, I really think you should work with retail investors, people who don't have, tons of money, but do have some income. The professionals, they can bring lots of other things to the table besides the money. I think you should mobilize them. And of course, I didn't blame them for their hesitance, because they're raising a $60 million fund. It's very difficult to go chasing around like, hey, $10,000, $20,000.
Yeah, it kind of feels like nickel and diming at that level.
Absolutely. Of course, that doesn't make any sense for GPs who are raising lots of funds. And of course, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their LPs to go like, we're raising the fund, we're investing in companies. So I said, you know what, make it my problem. Let me find you a group of investors who are very, first of all, deeply passionate. Second of all, working professionals, whether they're activists, therapists, whether they're techies, whether they're artists, they want to participate. Let me find them for you and we'll come in together. How about that? And so they were really open to it. And I was really happy to hear that they were open to sort of like that. So, took 2 months, brought in a bunch of people. That was fantastic. We all became LPs in the fund. But since then, I basically reached out and to those guys and said, I want to do more. What else can we do? And they offered, okay, why don't you become a venture partner? Now, in the realm of VC, venture partner is like sort of like it's a good and a meaningless term at the same time, because like, what does a venture partner do? In short, my role, and venture partners in different VC funds have different roles, like whether you're helping with operations, whether you're helping with business development, whether you're helping fundraising. My goal and sort of my agenda is to sort of like support the companies, portfolio companies in different ways. One of them is by creating different ways that retail investors, again, people who are not necessarily investing $50 or $500, but people who have, let's say, $5,000 minimum to invest in the seed round of a company. It could be a portfolio company, but I want to hopefully branch this network out to include supporting other seed stage investments and portfolio companies. So sorry, that's a long-winded way of saying that's how I came.
It's a good segue. I think and just to bring it back to what I said in our introduction, that's what, getting these retail investors access to these companies at those prices is something that doesn't really happen a lot. It's
no.
Usually these firms are looking for larger institutional players and funds.
I mean, as they should. I think in subsequent rounds, it might only make sense for, let's say, at this point in time, maybe for pre-seed or seed stage, right? Sort of like the party rounds.
Yeah.
But even then, I think I look at VC as a function of both state of technology, but it's all, but it's riddled with cultural problems.
Well, I just think it's a fantastic experiment because in the course of my work at Truffle Report, I'm not naming names, but I've seen a early stage investor deck or two, and then I've seen what they IPO at and what they're actually available for. So that's where my interest comes in terms of like the value and giving the little guy access to that value.
I think you nailed it. I think the word is access. I think it's important to recognize that this is extremely risky, right? The more upstream you go, the riskier it gets. But, if you think about, the real point is choice. And I think we're coming to a point of time where we all want to participate in a genuine way that is meaningful, impactful, right? If you talk about what is one of the primary issues of our generation and the generation after, right? It's economic precarity, uncertainty. It's like all these other things, gig economy, all this stuff. We're all looking at different ways to generate wealth. By wealth, I not only mean finance, I mean like mental health and all the, friends, family, community. And I think, outside psychedelics, the entire world of early stage VC is being upended. I'm still in the world of tech, and I work with a startup out of San Francisco called Affinity. We provide AI tools for venture capitalists. And so I have an exposure to what's happening. And in my own work over the last 14 months, the entire world of, I think, early stage venture capital is being upended because people, regular folks, want to move upstream and want to participate. If startups are becoming the dominant generators of prosperity and wealth, then why is it that retail investors are relegated to investing in things like ExxonMobil and Starbucks? Why can't we not participate and support the founders that we know, that are in our communities, that we have proximity to? Why not? And it's of course risky, but the question is of balance and access and choice ultimately. And that's sort of like what my agenda is.
I appreciate your passion on the subject. It's a really good answer to my question, so thank you. I would just say, talking about, I think we touched on climate change and tech as well as psychedelics. Why are these the perfect type of investments for them? Are they the perfect type of investments? If they're not, tell me what are some of the ins and outs there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you why they're the perfect type of investments. So like, I don't want to speak,
Yeah,
as a,
that's my choice of
you
words.
know,
If they're not perfect,
yeah. I'm not an investment advisor. I also am not from finance. This is all learning, and I will be the first one to say I'm learning as we go. I've been very fortunate to have, to have spaces where I can learn very tangibly, and I learn pretty fast usually, which is also why my life can be seen as an adventure or dog's breakfast. So it depends on who I talk to. I think so. We have to, like, if you think about a macro level, right? The world is, some will say, at the best it's ever been and the worst it's ever been, right? And the way I sort of like talk about it, I'm like, I've been an artist for 10 years, so I always talk in metaphors. So let me know if this is not clear. But for me, where we stand right now, the problem is that the past seems to be a lie and the future is uncertain. So we're in this liminal space, right? And whether somebody describes it that way or not, the fact is nobody can tell you what's coming. No one. All you could do is take educated guesses. And so why I say that is because, the market, the development of technology, the development of tools is going to be driven by storytelling and conviction, right? The future that is going to be built is the one that we believe in, is what I'm trying to get at. And so why technology, climate change in particular, within that, and then psychedelics is really important, is because it has high social resonance. People believe in it deeply. With climate change, I think looking as a way to technology as a way to, to address the sort of like endemic problems that we've created, whether it's waste, whether it's food, whether it's sort of social upheaval, with psychedelics, for the first time having these tools that have actually been here for thousands of years. Like earliest recorded use of psychedelics is 6,000 years ago, but we, in the last 56 years, we've completely destroyed that legacy and we stigmatized it, criminalized it. But we have an opportunity now to all of a sudden go like, I don't have to pop pills, one and done, right? Sort of, you do a journey, hopefully with the right people, the right set and setting, the right support system, integration after. It really does have a powerful effect. So, I think if we don't heal the internal chaos or address the internal chaos, we cannot address the external chaos. So, long answer to your succinct question is really, I think these are perfect quotes because they're driven by conviction. And I think as an early stage investor, again, it could be, with the angel investor, whether you're dabbling, I'm not a trader. I'm not a meme stock guy, only because I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just think I don't have the attention span for it. I just find myself looking at my phone every 2 seconds, 2 minutes. I just cannot do it.
Yeah,
so
that's
I
an
just
easy
go by
trap
what
to
I'm
fall
passionate
into.
about.
I've fallen into
Yeah, and
that trap once or twice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all part of the learning. I bought AMC shares.
Oh, me too.
And
I sold it exactly the wrong moment.
Yeah, exactly. You learn from that stuff.
Yeah, I paper handed right before it just shot up to 60 or whatever, and then
Oh my God! And then of course you look at the public psychedelic sort of sector right now. It's like, oh my God, don't look at it.
That's it. That's what taught me not to look at my phone every 2 minutes.
Exactly.
I was real, I had owned stocks before, but I started working in this and was real excited about psychedelics, and then was watching my brokerage account every couple of minutes over the past year, and in the past couple of months I maybe check it once a day if I can find the emotional strength to do so.
Once a day is good. I think you got to temper that. You have to temper yourself a little bit. Like you become like hard glass, right? Like, okay, it won't bother me. But sometimes it'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah, sometimes there's a little crack in that hard glass. if it's a double-digit percentage decline in a day on one of your big ones. Yeah. Anyway, on that note, speaking of the volatility in psychedelic stocks, I've heard it was actually an AMA done by Josh Hardman of Psilocybin Alpha, another psychedelics publication that I have a lot of respect for, saying that a lot of the volatility in the space comes down to, in effect, retail investors versus larger funds. And Josh, sorry if you're watching this and I'm vastly oversimplifying your words, And this, I think the gist was that this was because larger funds do tend to be in this for the longer haul. They are more risk tolerant, as they say, whereas retail investors, this is not true for all of them, but there is that characterization of the meme stock, Wall Street bets lurker who's just in for a quick 5x and then out. And those certainly do exist in any sector, including psychedelics. I just want to know, one, how do you feel about that characterization? And do you think the type of investment strategy you're encouraging will mitigate some of these concerns? Or these
I mean,
issues?
first of all, I'm a non-accredited retail investor.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm very open about it. I think it's really important to understand, and it's very easy to take sides.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very easy to draw a dichotomy, right? Smart people, stupid people, right? Yeah. Retail investors.
That does seem to be the gist of it.
Okay, that's sort of like the picture they try to draw, right? Absolutely, on one hand, volatility, and I think it's not like GameStop exposed this. We all knew this. The public market is a reflection of the human psyche in some ways, right? Like futures markets is all made up in some ways, all speculation. This is all speculative. So it's all emotional. So to say that, retail investors are emotional and stupid, cannot be trusted, I think it's just unfair. And I'm, frankly speaking, missing a really big opportunity here. So I will say, I think on one level, speaking again as an outsider learning about this stuff, part of the concern is absolutely real, right? Increased volatility means that, most of us have sat at home for the last 2 years, right? Some of us have gotten checks from the government. Some of us had savings, and we're all thinking about what do I do? And so investment has been gamified in certain ways. Robinhood and things like that sort of broke things open, right? And of course, we've seen a lot of, IPOs, a lot of private market activity, a lot of cool startups come up, a lot of fluff, a lot of bullshit. But I will say, when you say retail investors, it's important to ask what sort of retail investors. Somebody who invests $50, a couple $100, nothing wrong with that. I think everybody wants to participate. Put them in one category. Other investors are, let's say, perhaps a lot more tempered, are playing with larger dollars, have specific convictions, things like that. Put them in another, bucket. And then there's investors who get caught up in the hype, right? I generally try to avoid all hype, right? In fact, it took me, I only bought my first NFT 4 weeks ago, after I found a project I really actually believed in. So I bought a project I believed in, basically NFT. So my point is that I only did it because I believed in it. So that's the orientation. The point I'm trying to make is that I think on one level, people who have been in positions of power and influence, particularly in money, want to ridicule the small guy, right? Want to ridicule and want to pretend, because the whole thing is gated, right? You got your ivory towers of like intellectuals, finance people, and all these other people who are not really seeing the thing what's happening in the grassroots, which is people wanting to participate. I'm not saying that these people are wrong. I'm just saying, hey, look, everybody can play. So we want to play, make space for it. Let's talk about how. And if you talk about the new age of fintech, every top tier VC that is predicting what's going to happen in 2022 and 2023 is saying social investing, community-driven investing in both public and private market is going to be one of the biggest forces in fintech and in tech in general. And so if you're up on your ivory tower yelling and shitting on the small guy, you're going to miss out on opportunity here. So it's really up to you and who's driving the narrative, right? I'm not saying it's wrong. Absolutely, it's volatile because there's a lot of like emotional, hype-driven trading activity happening likely, but it's also a lot of narrative-driven, conviction-driven, but we all get binned into retail, right? I'm talking about people who can invest that $3,000-$4,000 angel check directly into a pre-seed or seed stage startup that will bring the sort of growth marketing, that will bring the sort of technology, IT operations, that will bring the sort of like consulting experience in addition to that check. And founders care about that. There's so much money in the market, and psychedelics, for good and bad. The good thing is like it's driven by high conviction people who've been in the underground advocating for years. I'm not one of them. You know, I've been sort of like advocating privately, but not, I didn't take a risk to my career like a lot of people have. But there's a lot of people doing that. But it's also a bad thing, which is we are very insular. We do not see, you know, like I'm so surprised by so many entrepreneurs in the sector who probably come from cannabis and lived in the underground for the longest time, can't even show up to meetings on time. Like, we have not matured as a sector, right? So once you mature and you look outside in the macro spaces, you sort of see what's happening. And I would say VCs are just fallible as the rest of us. They're not gods, they're not demigods, they don't get to predict the future, they get to be wrong a lot of time, but they do make good guesses. And the good VCs and the good people with money, I think, will recognize and want to embrace community and grassroots, because again, conviction drives outcomes, I think.
All right. I agree with you that conviction drives outcomes, and I'm interested. I think what I want to do is like do this again with you and me this time next year and talk about that fintech driven community investing and see how that worked out, because I could see that going a couple of different ways, and I think only time will tell. But I think that is a pretty good place to leave it for today. I will say thanks everyone for tuning into this week's Truffle Talks. Once again, I'm James Stephen, the editor of Truffle Report, and this has been Raad Seraj. You can find us online at truffle.report or as Truffle Report on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and truffle_report on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. See you next week.
Thanks, James. I appreciate the opportunity.